And to trending now. Well, poor Israel Folau cannot take a trick with the Twitter mob or the media left. The rugby superstar refused to take the knee over the weekend as part of the Marxist Black Lives Matter movement at a club game in Britain with the French club that he's playing with after being banned from playing here because he did a very bad thing. He quoted the Bible against gays. Now, this is really ironic because Folau was attacked here, lost his job for bringing religion into sport by posting something on social media, now is being attacked for not bringing politics into sport and on the field, and by the same critics. Sydney Morning Herald writer Peter Fitzsimons said, yes, it's Folau's absolute right not to take a knee, but it still takes my breath away. Seriously, Israel, the downside of expressing solidarity with a movement that believes we are all equal and deserve equal treatment would be what? Now, this is the same Peter Fitzsimons who complained when US quarterback Tim Tebow kneeled at a game, but he kneeled to his Christian God, not Black Lives Matter. And back then, Fitzsimons complained that people who kneel on one knee with head bowed every time they want to thank their God for allowing them to do something so fabulous on the sports field. Well, the closest, he said, was the Australian word public wankery. Public wankery, he called it. But kneeling to Black Lives Matter is not public wankery at all, is it? Joining me to, well, not if you're Peter Fitzsimons. Joining me is Daisy Cousens, a YouTube star with her own video channel. Daisy, kneeling to your God, terrible. Kneeling to Black Lives Matter, well, that's fantastic. And not kneeling to it, that is truly shocking. What does this say?
Well, I think it says a couple of things. The first is sort of the most obvious, is that it revealed what's politically correct and what is trendy, and has been over the last few years. I mean, and obviously we all know this, it is perfectly politically correct and indeed very trendy to make fun of Christians for doing Christian things like, you know, kneeling to your God and being thankful for all the gifts that he gives you. But oh, no, 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 no. You must not show any kind of dissent or criticism of Black Lives Matter. Absolutely not, because that's bad, because Black people are oppressed, and Black Lives Matter is all about equality and happiness and loveliness, not, you know, Marxism and control, etc., etc. So that's the first thing it tells us. But the second thing, Andrew, it tells us is that it seems that Peter Fitzsimons and all of the others who are criticising Israel Folau have forgotten that Israel Folau is in fact black. And they have been going on and on and on for a long time now about how we've got to listen to black and brown people. We've got to listen to their opinions. We've got to accept what they say about Black Lives Matter. We've got to not knock them for having opinions about Black Lives Matter. Well, hello, here is a black or brown man who clearly has very distinct opinions on Black Lives Matter and is not afraid to share them, and all of a sudden he's public enemy number one and he's terrible and he doesn't believe in equality and he's this, that and the other. I mean, I'm sorry. What happened about that push to listen to black and brown voices when it comes to Black Lives Matter? And it just proves again, Andrew, racial minorities are only useful in the eyes of the left if they are politically compliant, if they adhere to the political beliefs that white leftists have set out for them. And if they're not doing that, like Israel Folau is not, then oh no, they should be flung to the wolves and we should have nothing to do with them.
Absolutely. They suffer from a false consciousness and they're probably just been fooled by white folk. The ABC last month, I mean, it's the same sort of confusion with Israel Folau's ethnicity, I think. Interviewed a philosophy professor about Christians like Folau, sacked for his Christian views, and about whites complaining of anti-white racial discrimination. Well, if anyone can complain about discrimination, it's Folau. He lost his damn job. This philosopher, Dr. Louise Richardson-Self from Tasmania University, says anti-white racism isn't really that bad, you know, isn't really that bad, not like other racism, and nor is anti-Christian discrimination. Here she is.
So my argument is that even if you are offended by racialised speech as a white person, it's not harmful in the same way that racist hate speech is.
Because when you get knocked over, you're falling onto a pile of mattresses.
Basically, that's a good way of putting it.
Tim Costello was in the media saying, come on, Christians, you know, you're not an oppressed minority. Settle down with this Israel Folau, we're so persecuted stuff. Is that a similar kind of argument?
The Israel Folau case would be a perfect example of the argument that I'm making.
So how does that fly, do you think, Daisy? Anti-Christian discrimination doesn't really hurt because of all that Christian privilege. Yet I've seen churches burned down, people persecuted, dragged before the courts for being Christian. I've seen Folau lose his job, vilified by the media, and now he's got to play overseas. That doesn't really sound that trivial to me, to be honest.
No, and I think that perhaps Dr. Richardson's self should maybe do a little bit of research or have a little bit of a think before she starts talking about how anti-Christian discrimination isn't bad, etc., because according to a report that was commissioned by former UK Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, it turns out that Christians are actually the most persecuted religious group in the world. And in fact, if we are to quote the report, the persecution of them and the purging of them is so bad that it is at near genocidal levels, the persecution of Christians. So maybe she should think twice before she goes making those kinds of flippant, uninformed comments. And look, again, Andrew, I cannot believe that these people can denigrate Christians like this, can make fun of them, can dismiss any kind of, hate, or not hate speech, but, aggressive speech against them. I can't believe they can do that. And in the same breath believe that there's no sort of anti-Christian narrative that permeates Western society. Because if you're there denigrating Christians, saying they should tough it up, they should suck it up and not worry about the things that people are saying about them, and then facing no consequences yourself, well, you're proving that Christians are the only religious group out there that it is perfectly politically correct and even encouraged to disparage, ridicule and discriminate against on grounds of their religion. Well, I'm sorry, I don't think any religion should be disparaged or criticized or insulted purely on the basis that it exists or that people adhere to it. I think that's completely unacceptable. But the thing is, Andrew, as we know, bullies, and these are bullies, I think, they don't realize that their own behavior is bad. The bully never realizes that their own conduct is the problem. So maybe they should actually start listening to a few Christians and how they feel about it before they make this type of commentary.
Well, it just goes to the narrative that, you can't be racist to whites, or if you are, it's trivial, it's really trivial, which just proves to me that the anti-white racism, the Black Lives Matter movement, it's not about principle, it's about power, who's on top and who's not. And by the way, George Pell spent more than 400 days in jail for a crime he did not commit, and I think he was a martyr to his Christian faith. The ABC, meanwhile, is hunting out all kinds of racism, even if it doesn't see racism when it's against whites. It's found other racism. He's published an article by Gary Nunn, who has a world map upside down, because he says the usual maps, Daisy, have Europe and the US, up on top. That is steeped in the politics of tradition, nationalism, religion, race relations, and a possible fixation with the Northern Hemisphere. In other words, it's a bit too racist. Whites on top, black countries below. Is he onto something, Daisy?
Oh my goodness, Andrew! Let's all take a moment to praise the heavens that Gary Nunn has finally defeated all racism ever by turning a world map upside down. How absolutely fabulous he's done it! Just like lolly companies with Redskins and Chico's changing their names and Netflix banning certain television shows. My goodness, racism is finally defeated. And of course, Andrew, you can tell that I'm being completely sarcastic. Obviously,
I was right on board. I mean, if we're down to quarrelling about this, what have we got left to really worry about?
Exactly. This is all just completely tokenistic garbage from the regressive left that simply masks any kind of real conversation about the real issues that certain racial minorities communities face, like black on black crime in the US, and of course fighting the Indigenous community here.
A tip for anyone inviting him to your dinner party, give him an extra 30 minutes in case his map reading skills got a little confused by trying to turn it on his head.